Right. This is going to be like a fantastic message, I can tell, because we're having all kinds of technical issues today. That's usually how it happens, right? This week has been a reminder to me about how old I actually am and how much I do not have things in control. And I think this morning is just carrying it on. I uh, I I was with my daughter this week, and we were going to conferences, and she was like, "Dad, race me to the door." Yeah, my 13-year-old daughter, this should be easy. I'll beat her in like half a second. I'll be ahead of her. Yeah, that wasn't happening, and I'm sore still from that. I hurt. Right? It's like I'm like, what is this thing called running? Haven't done this in a while, and I'm like, oh, you know what? Hon, you win. Like I was like 2 steps into it. I was like, yeah, you're good. You win. You're fine, right? And then poor thing got injured yesterday, so that's not good. We went to the homecoming of Northwestern, my alma mater, yesterday, and that was a great time. And my little girl got injured and playing on one of those things, bouncy houses, right? Her knee got kind of twisted up a little bit, but I was thinking to myself, great, I don't have to walk 2 miles to the car now. I can get a ride with one of the vehicles because she can't go anywhere. I was sore, and I was like thinking myself, but I think of my daughter too, right? So gotta be thoughtful, and that's what we're going into today about. We're talking about being thoughtful about things, and specifically when it comes to spiritual things. And so, I don't know about you. There's an ongoing debate in this world, okay? And we're gonna get into the hard topic right away. This debate is one with strong feelings on both sides. People get fairly judgmental towards each other about this topic. We talked about being judgmental last week, right? I even heard one person say that they would never taken part in what the other side were talking about taking part in. That was unacceptable. It was an unacceptable thought, and it was kind of disgusting. Now, of course, I'm talking about the great pizza debate. You know what I'm talking about, right? Right? I know. Like, is pineapple an acceptable topping on a pizza? Right? You know who you are, right? Some question this, like, what are you doing? And are you going to start putting pineapple, like pepperoni on ice cream, right? Is that how that works? Is that what we're going to do to maybe squirt some ketchup on our breakfast cereal, right? Oreos and ranch dressing. I could maybe try that one. Is that how we're living now, right? It's like a culinary blasphemy to some people, right? To put this fruit on there, the unholy union between pizza and pineapple. And people can be pretty judgy on this, right? There's a lot of debate out there. But I tell you what, once you try pineapple on pizza, your life changes, right? It's different, right? Your taste buds will be assaulted, or should I say serenaded, with an unexpected symphony of flavors. The savory and spicy pepperoni harmonizing perfectly with the sweet tropical notes of the pineapple. The acidic tang of the fruit cuts through the richness of the cream of the cheese and its beautiful collision of flavors. A paradoxical pairing that somehow works in perfect culinary harmony. Beethoven conducting a symphony in our mouths, right? And to be honest, the first time I saw pineapple as a topping was on the Hawaiian pizza, Canadian bacon. We don't eat Canadian bacon, which I'm not a fan of. So I was kind of an anti-pineapple person, right, for a long, long time. But one sunny afternoon on the seaside town of Santa Cruz, California, a friend suggested that I get a calzone, back when calzones were just a California thing, with pepperoni and pineapple. And I was like, I wasn't really sure at first. And I told him, I said, the reason why fruit shouldn't be on pizza. I reluctantly gave in and took my first bite in front of my friends who had already learned the joys of pineapple. And immediately I felt freedom and I felt community because I was a part of them now. We could agree on this one issue and we could be one, united in this new world that had been opened up to me. Okay, that was a little bit theatrical, I know. But there's a sense in which we think that the only way we can really be together on something is if we all see it the same way. Right? If we all have the same taste, if we have the same opinions, the same preferences, the same politics, the same interpretation, like in order for us to have community, we've all got to see things the same way, right? And the idea is perpetuated in our culture because we are bombarded these days, right? Like with hot takes and viral threads and trending topics and the questions that we're confronted with all the time. I don't think it used to be this way at all, right? It didn't used to be this way, but it certainly is now. We're constantly being asked, what do you think? What's your opinion? What tribe are you in on this? Where do you stand on this issue? I mean, throughout the day, we are constantly exposed to that question in one way or another. I mean, it could be global politics or the latest celebrity scandal or whether or not hot dog is a sandwich, right? Like, it could be on anything, but there's lots of opinions, lots of different perspectives, and this pressure to pick a side, right? And it has caused us a lot of division, and we see it even within the church. We see it in God's house, but we see it in our homes as well. Lots of division between families and friends and communities. We just get focused on what we think on our tastes and our preferences. And so last week we began the series called Separation of Church and Hate, right? And we're going to go through Romans chapter 14, and Paul's addressing our tendencies to allow disagreement to turn into division or to disunity. And it's because we get so focused on issues, sometimes we don't necessarily agree on, that we lose sight of what's really important. We get so obsessed with being right that we forget about the relationship side of it. And so he challenges us in Romans 14 to not miss the big picture, that we need to be united, and unity doesn't happen because we agree. Unity happens because we accept. There's something within us that thinks, oh, if you'll just agree with me, then we can have unity. That's the problem. Like, you don't agree with me. If you agreed with me, then we would have this unity. And so we'll debate and we'll argue and we'll fight and we'll have conflict. And for some of you, maybe this is the case in your homes. Like, you and your spouse are always fighting and arguing over the same things, right? The temperature, right? Talked about the temperature last week. And you think the way you're going to have peace and unity in your house is if that one person, the other person, will just agree with the other. But the secret to unity is not agreement. Romans 14 would say it's acceptance. Accept one another as Christ has accepted you. And that word acceptance is this arms open wide, right? Arms open wide acceptance. Like, for people that don't necessarily agree, that we don't agree with, specifically as Paul talks about in Romans when it comes to these areas of disputable matters. But acceptance is hard. It's hard, right? I'm guessing it's hard for you for the same reason it's hard for me. It's hard for me because I know I'm right. Right? Like, I mean, if I didn't know I was right, then there's no problem. But like, I know I'm right. I know my opinion is right. I know my perspective is right. I know my interpretation is right. My tastes are right. And my preferences are right. And you know that too. And when you know you're right, it's hard to accept people who disagree with you. James 4:1 asks the question, it says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? You just take a second to answer this. And in your life, right now, where's there disagreement in your life? What's causing that disagreement in your life? What's the source of that in your life? Now, a lot of us would say it's an issue, or something that we just can't agree upon. But a lot of us would say it's a person, right? We would say, well, if he would be more reasonable, if she'd stop being so critical, if they would just be a little bit more objective, if she'd listen to me, if he'd stop dismissing me. And so we point to a person. It's not so much that what causes fights and quarrels, it's who, and it's him or it's her, and we point maybe to a person. But verse 1 goes on to say, don't they come from your desires that battle within you? Like, you want something and you don't get it. Isn't that where it comes from, this battle? You want something and you're not getting it. You want it your way. This isn't Burger King, right? And it's not happening your way. You want them to feel the way you think they should feel, and that's not how they feel. You want the decision to go the direction that you think it should go, and that's not the direction the decision's going. And that's causing fights, disunity. And it's that you don't get what you want. We want our way, and and when we don't get that way, it causes disagreements. And in Romans 14, it's going to challenge us when it comes to disputable matters, that there's something that matters more than being right. And that is the relationship. And so Romans 14 talks to us about how we be thoughtful of others when we disagree, when we're sure someone is wrong, when you disagree about a decision, when there's an issue that just it separates you from someone else. How can we be thoughtful in a way that protects the relationship and keeps the unity? Romans chapter 14, verses 13. Therefore, let us stop passing judgment on one another. Instead of passing judgment, make up your mind not to put any stumbling block or obstacle in the way of a brother or sister. Don't let your strong opinions or your perspectives or the way you talk about your strong opinions and perspectives become an obstacle that gets in the way of other people's spiritual growth. And that gets in the way of their relationship with God and the relationship with others. So just as a reminder, if you weren't here last week, here was the areas of disagreement for the early church in Rome here. Like this is the Roman church. Some of the believers felt like it was wrong to eat meat bought from the market because most of the meat in the market was sacrificed to an idol, right? And they're like, no, we don't want to have anything to do with that. We're going to be vegetarians. We're not going to eat the meat. Other believers are like, hey, the idols aren't even real. Like it's fine to eat the meat because it's not real, right? It's just meat. It's no big deal. Some of the believers said we can only worship on Saturday. We have to worship on the Sabbath. Other believers are like, no, that's the way it used to be, but that's not the way it is now. There's not one day that's more sacred than the other. And so they had these issues that were beginning to like really create division among the early church, within that church, different people on different sides of the issue. And Paul is saying to these believers, he's saying, look, don't disagree in such a way that you're going to be a stumbling block for other people's spiritual growth. Like, don't let the issue become more important than the mission that's set before you. Like, and the phrase he uses here is make up your mind, right? But right here, make up your mind that you're going to be different. When you disagree, we tend to react emotionally. I think that's true for all of us, I would say. Like, if you disagree with me, sometimes the adrenaline kicks in. I didn't even feel that strongly about it until you disagreed with me, right? But now I feel super strongly about it, and we react emotionally. It just kind of builds up, and it just comes out. And the phrase, make up your mind, is saying, don't react emotionally. Instead, make a deliberate decision, predetermined in your mind. Like, here's how I'm going to handle these kinds of disputable matters in these areas of disagreement. But that's kind of tough for us, because when there's a disagreement, we get passionate and defensive and sensitive. It's okay. We can be sensitive. So let me just give you some thoughtful questions to stop and ask yourself to determine if it's an emotional reaction or if you're making up your mind. You're being thoughtful. So the first area would be defensiveness. All right, here's the question. Do I quickly try to justify myself and counterattack instead of listening honestly? When there's a disagreement, am I in my mind going straight to rebuttal? The rebuttal process. Am I going to make my case and here's why I'm right and you're wrong? If that's what's happening in my mind, that's an emotional response. I can't look at this one because this is soft now. It's technology. That's what happens. That's an emotional response if that's the case. Here's the second area, sensitivity. Am I interpreting disagreement over ideas and opinions as attacks against myself? Like, where somebody can't disagree with me without me taking it personally. You disagree with me, and suddenly that means you don't like me. So when I feel like your disagreement is a personal attack, it tells me that I'm reacting emotionally. Here's the third area. It would be rumination. Right? Am I replaying the disagreement in my mind? You're just kind of thinking about it, ruminating on it. Like the person's not even around, but we're going at it in my head. Right? Like, we're arguing about it in my head. I'm driving in my car by myself. No one's in the car, and I'm thinking about it. But out loud, I'm saying what I want to say. I should have said this. Right? Like I'm in the shower rehearsing what I'm going to say. Like, you can't handle the truth. I'm rehearsing in my case and my points. And just ruminating on the issues, on the fact that somebody is disagreeing with me. Area number 4 is all or nothing thinking. Am I looking at the disagreement in extreme terms rather than keeping perspective and understanding nuance of the situation? It's the idea of saying, well, if we can't agree on this, then I guess we got we got nowhere to go. We can't move forward. If we can't agree on this, then I guess I can't stay at this church. Guess I can't be in this small group. If we can't agree in this, then I guess I can't come over, for home for Thanksgiving. And some of you are in marriages, maybe where this was the case. Like there's this area where you do not agree, and that has become foundational. Your disagreement has become the foundation of your relationship. And you think, if we don't agree on this means we can't move forward. We must not be right for each other because we can't reach this agreement, because we can't agree on this issue. That's an all or nothing type of thinking. Number 5 is personalizing. And I'm assuming, am I assuming negative intentions behind the other person's perspective? Right? I'm assuming that their position or their pineapple ideas or their interpretations or their political views, it's coming from this negative place. Whatever they're doing, it's negative. That's why. We talked about this last week, the fundamental attribution error. When I look at my opinions and my beliefs and my perspective, I know my intentions. I know I'm well intended. I know my circumstances in life. I am looking at my perspective through that lens. But when somebody else who disagrees with me expresses that, I don't give them the same benefit, right? The final area will be this. I'll just call it this. Pineappling. Okay? Am I stubbornly holding on to an opinion and refusing to be open to new ideas? It's pineapple on the pizza, right? Like, I don't know why I feel so strongly about this, but I feel strongly. I've never really explored this for myself, but it's what my parents taught me. It's what my grandparents practiced. It's what the church I grew up in believed. And so I'm holding on to this. I'll fight for it even though I don't know really why. I really feel strongly about this. And so Paul says, don't react emotionally, but make up your mind. Decide in advance that you're going to handle this in a way that is not a stumbling block or an obstacle that gets in the way of relationship. Now, here's how the Message paraphrase verses 13 it says, forget about deciding what's right for each other, these disputable matters. You don't have to decide what's right for other people. Here's what you need to be more concerned about, that you don't get in the way of someone else making life more difficult than it already is. So, this image of here is of a stumbling block or an obstacle. So picture yourself, you're going for a walk, right? No, not running. We're not running today. No running. And this walk is your spiritual growth path. And you're on this path, and suddenly there's an obstacle in front of you. And the only way that you can keep moving forward on this path is to go over that obstacle. And it's tiring, right? Climbing all these obstacles. It's frustrating and it takes time, but you finally get over it, and then you get to the other side of it, and you couldn't see it, but there's another obstacle. And you get over that obstacle, and there's another obstacle. It's the obstacle course in basic training all over again in my head, right? It never seemed like it ended. And Paul is saying, look, don't let your opinions and your perspectives, your interpretations over these disputable matters put all kinds of obstacles on the path of people who are following Jesus. Specifically, these Jewish believers who held on to all these different rules and traditions, right? They're saying, don't do this. Like, you're making it hard for the Gentiles. They're coming into the church. They're seeking after Jesus. They're on this path. They're excited about it. And then you put all these obstacles in front of them, making it hard for no reason. And they have to go around it in order to keep moving forward. And don't put obstacles in the path. Don't put obstacles in the path of people who are spiritually pursuing Jesus. So let me just give you 3 stumbling blocks to watch out for. Number 1, actions that tempt or confuse other people. Actions that tempt or confuse other people. Now, Romans 14 helps us understand that our actions and our decisions may not be sinful for us, but they could potentially cause others to sin, right? Like when we go to the men's retreat, we go up to the cabin, there's usually alcohol up there, like leftover alcohol from something. We make sure it's gone, right? It's not because it's sinful, but because to us or to whoever is removing it, it's because someone who may be coming up could cause them to have a stumbling block. And we do that so that we are thoughtful. We're thoughtful for these people, these men that are coming up. And we don't want to put an obstacle in their way of pursuing Jesus over the weekend. I'm considering what impact that will have on other people. Did Jesus first, yourself last, others in between method, right? Joy. That's how you get joy in your life. And Paul makes it clear here, as we'll see, that even though he doesn't personally have a conviction about eating meat sacrificed to idols, like he's okay with that. He's not going to do that if it causes other people to stumble. And if it violates their conscience, he's not going to do that. Now, an obvious example of this culturally would be social drinking, right? Like the Bible clearly prohibits drunkenness. The Bible does not prohibit a glass of wine at a meal or having a beer at a ball game. Like that's not prohibited. The Bible does prohibit you from judging people who see the issue or issues like this different than you, though. The Bible prohibits that. The Bible does prohibit you taking your personal convictions and then requiring everyone to follow suit. But the Bible also prohibits you from exercising your freedom in a way that might cause someone to stumble. Like that's prohibited. And so you stop and you consider not what's my right, but what's best for the people around me. How is it affecting them? I heard a story from a pastor who was said that he was having dinner with a friend of his. He hadn't seen his friend in a long time. He'd come into town, and he's having dinner with him. And he'd been out. His friend had been out of treatment for alcohol addiction for about 2 weeks at this point. They were just catching up at this restaurant. But then someone who had heard the pastor's latest message bought him a beer to say thank you, right, for his message. That was a nice gesture. Now that's a situation, right? Like he wanted to be thoughtful. And on one hand, he had this guy who's been given a gesture of thanks to him. And on the other hand, he was having a dinner with his friend that was a recovering alcoholic. So he couldn't really be drinking alcohol in front of him. That's not right. So he asked himself, what would Jesus do, right? And he goes, oh, Jesus would turn the wine to water. That's what he would do. He's not going to have a stumbling block here. And I asked the server if I could exchange it for a peanut butter pizookie. If you ever had one of those, it's really good. It's a dessert. And he felt like Jesus would have done, he would have done that, right? And so he had this dessert instead. And so you have this situation where you stop to be thoughtful. And what's really important is not necessarily your freedom for what you want or what you can do, but it's the other person's faith. It's not that you want to be legalistic. It's that you want to be thoughtful in the situation. And so we are willing to limit our freedoms, not out of legalism, but out of love, right? Out of love. Not out of rule of following, right? Following the rules, but out of relationship. Romans 14:15, if your brother or sister is distressed because of what you eat, you're no longer acting in love. Your right is secondary to your attitude that discourages others' relationships with that person, right? If it discourages a relationship, then that's not right. So number one, stumbling block. Actions that tempt or confuse others. Number two, I'm not used to this. Okay. Number two, attitudes that discourage others. This is a little bit more subtle type of stumbling block, right? But it's clearly part of what Paul is addressing here in Romans 14. There were attitudes that each of these believers had towards one another because of this area that they didn't agree on, right? And what they didn't understand is their attitude towards one another. It wasn't just affecting the relationship with each other. It was affecting the other people who were part of the church outside of that situation watching. So Romans 14 would encourage you to have your own strong personal convictions. Like that's good. You don't have to. You don't get. It's good, but you don't get to apply that to other people. Right? Your strong convictions, right, on disputable matters. The problem is for those of us who've been in church for a long time, what happens is our personal convictions begin to mix with our pride, and we start to develop a spirit of self-righteous cynicism towards people who haven't landed the same in the place that we have. Like they don't agree with us, and we just get judgmental and we can be negative. And so Paul would say your legalism or your cynicism is creating these obstacles and stumbling blocks for people who are new to the faith and trying to follow Jesus. And they don't understand why you would treat each other this way. You're treating each other over these things. And if I could just say that this is as clearly and as lovingly as I can. I think this is especially true if you have children in your home, right? Like you want your children to fall in love with Jesus. You want them to be a part of the church community. You want them to be faith-filled adults. But if you're putting obstacles of legalism and cynicism in their path, you're making it difficult for them to follow Jesus. Your legalism will, well-intentioned as it might be, those rules that you attach to following Jesus, it's not just that they're rules for your household, but you've attached them to, oh, if you're a Christian. And these are all the things you should do. Those are the bricks that are building up a wall to their path to follow Jesus. They can't taste that Jesus is good because they're choking on legalism. The other obstacle or stumbling block is your cynicism. Again, I think this is especially challenging for those of us who have been in church for a long time, just as it was for the Jews who are part of the Roman church. Your critical tone to people who are new to the faith. Right? Your eye rolling when people talk to you about spiritual experiences. Your cynicism of, well, that can't be real. Your conversations when you get in the car after church and you start saying everything you don't agree with. Your kids are picking up on all of that, by the way, if you have kids. And you're poisoning the well that you want them to drink from. So be thoughtful and considerate how other people are hearing it and what you're saying. Doesn't mean you're wrong. Doesn't mean that your perspective or your opinion is invalid. But are you communicating it in a way that honors relationship? The relationship that that person has with Jesus and that they have with you and the body of believers. And just consider that your legalism may not be righteousness, it may be a stumbling block. And your cynicism may not be conviction, it may be cancer that is spreading to your home and to the people you love because it's contagious. And it's making it harder for them to follow Jesus. Third stumbling block would be rigid expectations that burden others. This is where we take our personal convictions, right? And we will elevate them to essential behaviors, where we take a personal conviction and we make it a spiritual requirement. And if you don't agree with me, then you're not really a Christian, right? If you don't eat the way I eat, if you don't worship the way I worship, if you don't vote the way I vote, if you don't educate the way I educate, if you don't dress the way I dress, if you don't interpret the way I interpret, I'm not sure we're on the same team, right? I'm not sure your relationship with Jesus is real. And so you start attaching all these extra things to the gospel message. Verse 14 through 15 gives us Paul's personal perspective on this issue. And so he's not going to make a case here or make the statement that he thinks it's fine to eat meat sacrificed to idols. But what I want you to notice is he doesn't really make a case. He doesn't spend any time developing the idea. Like he doesn't spend like 2 pages explaining why and what this means. And here's the Greek words and here's what it meant in the Old Testament. He doesn't do any of that. Why? Because here's how he lands on it. He's like, okay, he's okay with it if you don't agree with him on this. He thinks he's right, but it's not really an issue that needs to be debated at this point. It's okay. It's not something that's significant enough to even have the conversation about. You don't have to agree with him. So he doesn't make the case, but he does say where he lands on this. He says, I'm convinced and I'm fully persuaded in the Lord Jesus that nothing is unclean in and of itself. But if anyone regards something as unclean, then for that person it is unclean. If your brother or sister is distressed because of what you eat, you're no longer acting in love. Do not, by eating, destroy someone for whom Christ died. Do not exercise your freedom in a way that gets in the way of the works God's trying to do in someone's life. That's what he's saying. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so he's making this point. When it comes to disputable matters, that oftentimes the issue isn't really the issue. And that's good for us in the church to hear because, I mean, if you've been in the church or any churches, the issue isn't really the issue. You know that any issue can be made an issue, right? But it's not just true in the church, right? I mean, I know that for many of us, like this is what happens in our personal relationships. You think the issue is perhaps that your spouse won't stay on budget. Like you think the issue is your kids won't clean up after themselves. You think the issue is that your in-laws don't understand boundaries. You think the issue is that your wife likes it at a ridiculous 73 degrees in the house, right? You think the issue is that your husband won't help out around the house, or that you think the issue is that your friend doesn't agree with you politically. And Paul's saying, look, you're so focused on what the issue, what about this issue, but the issue isn't the issue. There's something more important. There's something greater at stake here. And he zooms out. He zooms out, and he's like, when we have disagreements with one another, what we get to really focus on a single issue, and that's all we can see. That's all we focused on is that one single issue, and we get very tunnel visioned. But if you zoom out, you'll see there's a much bigger picture here. And so Paul wants to give the believers this perspective. As right as you may be about this disputable matter, as important as the issue might be to you, there's something more important than you being right. There's something more important than that. And it's a relationship. There's a way to be right and still be wrong. Like sometimes you can be right and still be wrong. Sometimes there's something more important than being right. And we see a great example of this in Luke 13. Jesus is teaching on the Sabbath, right? And in the synagogue. And in the middle of his message, it appears that it gets interrupted by this woman that we don't know a lot about. But she's been crippled for 18 years, and it uses the word crippled, but it goes on to explain that her condition is that she's just always bent over, right? She's always been bent over at the waist, and she can't straighten up. She can't straighten her back up. And so it would appear that she had this pretty severe issue with her spine where she just walked around bent over. For 18 years, had not been able to straighten up. And Jesus sees her. No doubt it's a painful condition that she was dealing with for almost 2 decades of her life, and Jesus loves her. And he wants to heal her, but it's the Sabbath. And technically, the way most people interpret it during that time period, healing on the Sabbath would have been considered work, right? Work. And you can't work on the Sabbath. And so Jesus says to her, I'm going to open up tomorrow at 9 a.m. if you want to come back. We're closed today for healing, but if you come back tomorrow, I'll take care of it. No, that's not what Jesus does. We read in verse 12, when Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, woman, you're free from your infirmity. And then he puts his hands on her, and immediately she straightens up and praised God. Now you would think that everyone would be thrilled for her, right? I think of that meme where everyone's cheering at the big screen, right? And they're in the restaurant or something like that. And there's a crowd of people, and they just start cheering, right? That's what I think we should be doing, right? Whatever you think about the Sabbath and working on the Sabbath, you would think that everyone in that moment would just be like, well, this is great. I'm going to set that aside because this is incredible. This is amazing. This woman was 18 years of this condition, and now she's standing up straight and praising God. But that's not the response of the religious leaders that were there. Instead, verse 14, he says, here's the word they used. They were hypocrites. Right? Who do you think you are? You come in here on a Sabbath and you break our command. They're indignant that Jesus would heal this woman on the Sabbath. Now, just imagine for a moment being so focused on the issue that people all around you are getting saved and you don't even notice it. Can you imagine that? They're getting saved and you don't even notice because you're worried about the legal side of things. Imagine being so focused on your opinion and your perspective and your interpretation and your agenda that there are people who have, for 18 years, have been addicted and they're being set free from that addiction. There are people who have been for 18 years lived with guilt and shame and are discovering freedom in Christ, but you don't even notice it because you're indignant that something was done the way you think it shouldn't have been done. And Jesus calls them hypocrites. He doesn't let it go. Sometimes you can be right and still be wrong. Verse 16 and 17, therefore do not let what you know is good be spoken of as evil, for the kingdom of God is not a matter of eating and drinking, but of righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. Your right to do something doesn't always give you the right to do it. There's something more important than you being right. That is righteousness. It's the kingdom of heaven that's more important. So as we finish up, I'm going to give you a few ways to live this out this week. Because I think all of us, we're going to have an opportunity to engage with somebody who doesn't agree with us this week, right? I guarantee it. So, a few things from Romans 14. Number one, I would say, practice the pause. Practice the pause. This helps you not react emotionally, but make up your mind. James 1:19 says, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to become angry. A few questions to ask yourself just to help you be more thoughtful when there's disagreement. Number one, am I truly listening or am I just waiting to respond? Am I asking questions? Do I really want to understand? Question number two, how can I make this person feel valued and heard? You put the focus on the person first. Doesn't mean you don't get to express your opinion, right? It doesn't mean that you can't share your ideas or your thoughts or your perspective, but if you can't do it in a way that honors that person, if you can't care for that person at the same time, if you can't say anything good at all, don't say anything, right? We learned that in grade school. Then you should just be quiet. You shouldn't say anything. You need to first think, okay, do I have the right heart? Do I have the right words for this person? And how can I communicate that? And so practice the pause. Secondly, seek to understand. Seek to understand. At the heart of thoughtfulness that we hear about in Romans 14 is this, I want to understand where you're coming from, right? A genuine understanding of the situation. And so you ask yourself a couple questions. Question one, how might this person's experience differ from my own? Just stop and think about that. Like, we tend to surround ourselves with these echo chambers of people that think and see things the way we do and live similar circumstances as we do, who have certain similar influences that we do. But just stop and ask, how are we different? How are they different from me? Are their experiences different? Maybe they're different ages, maybe they're different ethnicities. Challenge your assumptions. Maybe there's a different social economic group. Maybe they kind of grew up going to a certain kind of church that's different than what you were experienced with. Just stop and ask yourself, how are they different? Challenge your assumptions about that person. When you feel like I'm just assuming these things to be true because they don't agree with me, so this must be who they are. Push past that and ask yourself another question. How would I feel if I was in their position? Right? Wearing their shoes for a day? Just take a minute and put yourself in their shoes. Nothing will grow compassion in your heart more quickly than just stopping and thinking, well, what would it be like? What are they dealing with right now? Bob is experiencing that right now. Maybe there are bills that they can't pay, and it's really affecting some things. Maybe they're carrying a lot of guilt or shame from a decision they made a long time ago that changes their perspective. And it doesn't mean that they're right, it just means that they're asking the questions. By asking those questions, you start to have a different perspective on the situation, a different compassion for them. Number three, focus on what really matters. Ask yourself the question, am I more focused on maintaining the relationship or being right? I want to be honest and straightforward, but I want to honor and protect the relationship. And that means that sometimes things will, to a point in a disagreement where you realize, oh, you know what, this person has really said this, how they feel about this, and what they think about this. And I have said, here's how I feel, and here's what I think, and we don't agree. In this situation, we don't, and there's probably nothing else that we really need to say. It's okay. We're just going to disagree on this. It's okay to disagree. But that doesn't mean we can't be great neighbors, right? Doesn't mean we can't be friends. Doesn't mean that we can't worship together. Doesn't mean we were not still family. We can agree to disagree. It's okay. It's not a bad thing. Another question is, what would it look like to serve Christ in this moment? So whatever moment you're thinking about, where you were at, what would be if you were serving Christ in this moment? That's the ultimate question, isn't it? Right? I'm going to set my sights aside, my rights aside. I'm not going to make my primary focus on being right. I'm going to think through how I can serve Christ in this moment with this person. Verse 18, anyone who serves Christ in this way is pleasing to God and receives human approval. That's so helpful, right? Because when you accept people who see things different like on these disputable matters, right? When you accept people who don't agree with you, when you accept people who have a different interpretation on some doctrinal issue, when you decide you're not going to make a big deal out of something that honestly is a really big deal to you, it's hard, it's difficult, but it's also humbling because you're serving Christ in that moment. When you decide you're not going to make it about being right or exercising your rights, the primary thing, but the secondary thing to the purpose of Jesus. It's pleasing to God. And Paul says it brings human approval. Like people will notice that you are being humbled like that. I think that's going to be increasingly true in this very tribal and divided world that we currently live in. One of the things that can set us apart as believers, I think, is that we don't demand our own way. And we don't put our opinions, our perspectives above honoring people that are different than us. Loving people doesn't mean that we don't speak. It doesn't mean that we don't engage, but we do it with love. We do it honoring the relationship. And sometimes you can be right and still be wrong. And so this week you have an opportunity, I think, to choose between being right and being righteous. I think sometime this week you'll probably have an opportunity to choose between standing your ground or standing in the gap for that person. You'll have an opportunity to choose between being a stumbling block or a stepping stone for that person. An opportunity between being a barrier or being a bridge. And so asking yourself, what would it look like to serve Christ in this moment? Zoom out of the issue and look at the big picture of what God wants you to do. Before I pray, I want to bring up something real quick. In new marriages, it's challenging. A lot of us have been in marriages for a while, but those early days of marriages, it can be challenging. And I want to bring up that Adam and Cass were married last week. It's my privilege to marry them, and I want to have you stand up and say, yeah. Just remember, you can be right and still be wrong. All right, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you. We thank you. Thank you for Jesus. We thank you for the example that He has given us about loving others. And that help us not to be legalistic on our beliefs. Help us to be loving in our relationships. Help the focus to be on the relationship with you, with the other person, and their relationship with you, and how we can further that, not being right. Lord, there's a lot of people out there that need to know you, and that have only known you through people who have been right and pushed people away from you. Help us to reach those people that have been pushed away, that need to know the truth, that you love them, who they are, where they are. Help us to be that portion of your body, to reach those people and pull them in.